Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Francois, you can start the event.
Okay, so maybe Virginia, do you have any logistic information to give to the participant before I start?
For the participant, your microphone and your camera are closed, but if you have any question, you can share your question by the chat.
Okay, and just so if you don't mind, this webinar will be registered, and we hope that it will be watched several times after it. So thank you everybody to come with us this afternoon and to participate to this Green Week event regarding EPR. We all know that EPR now is really crucial and in the center of a lot of discussion regarding the Green Deal, the circular economy, and how to have a more resilient Europe towards certain materials. And we all know already what are the benefits of EPR, but we also know that we could also still improve the system. And today with us, we have 3 key speakers. I will present the 3 and I will give them the floor just after. So we are happy to have with us Peter Berkeley. I think that Peter, a lot of person knows you because you have been working on circular economy and EPR and waste management since a lot of years already. You are administrator at OECD in Paris, and you have, I think, more than 25 years experience. So we are really pleased today. The second speaker is Vanessa Chesneau, and she is the head of public affairs and product policy at FEVE. FEVE is the European Federation of Container Glass, and she deals with circular economy topics and coordinate also the Close the Glass Loop, multi-stakeholder partnership to establish a material stewardship program and to increase the bottle-to-bottle recycling results. The third speaker for the first panel will be someone from CITEO, so the PRO, French PRO on packaging. Margot Valentin, she works as eco-design project manager at CITEO, and she's engineer specialized in energy and environment. So I would first ask each of you to give some insight about what you would like to address as a message on EPR and how we can tackle not only producers' behavior, but also consumer producer with this very important instrument, the EPR principle. And we say EPR schemes, but we know that we have several systems that can be implemented through this principle. So Peter, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes to give your insight about that.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, Françoise, and hello to everyone. Very pleased to be here on the panel today. As Françoise has already said, I myself have worked on EPR for many years now, but maybe certainly more importantly, the OECD is probably the first institution that did also develop guidance for policymakers on extended producer responsibility. As early as I think 1999, we issued the first guidance for policymakers on extended producer responsibility. So I think, you know, we're, as Laurence, as you have said, Françoise, we're looking back at a history with a lot of successes. But the link to product design, which I think is at the core of what we're discussing today in the panel, is actually in a way the weak link, or has been at least in the past, of extended producer responsibility. In fact, when extended producer responsibility was invented at the beginning of the 1990s, and it was invented in academia, Lund University, Thomas Lindqvist, and a few others. The whole idea was that extending the responsibility of producers to the end-of-life management costs would actually generate incentives at the level of producers to improve product design so as to minimize those costs. And but at the same time, the implementation of extended producer responsibility through collective producer responsibility, the implementation of producer responsibility organizations meant that, in fact, those incentives were then diluted and not reaching producers in the same way as individual producer responsibility, which I think was really what academics had in mind when they invented it, would have delivered. So the fact that we have collective producer responsibility, of course, has a lot of advantages, not least the economies of scale that can be achieved thanks to it. But it has this drawback that it dilutes incentives for producers to actually improve the product design. And this is why, since a number of years now, we are discussing the introduction of modulated fees, I mean, EPR fees that are modulated according to certain product characteristics, characteristics that essentially are geared towards recyclability, but not only. And so to circumvent collective producer, or the drawback of collective producer responsibility, we are trying to bring the incentives back through the fee modulation. The results of what probably can still be called an experiment, because fee modulation is only being rolled out now across EPR systems. So we don't have a lot of exposed experience with actually seeing the effects. Fee modulation is really being rolled out across the EU. It's being rolled out across a number of EPR systems in Northern America as well. And certainly experience from France and Italy, which are the first adopters, and we'll probably hear more from CITEO, from Margot about this, certainly seems to indicate that that the effects on product design can be positive, but we're still lacking quantitative data, at least at our level here at OECD, to properly assess those impacts, those effects on product design. So clearly fee modulation is important and needed, but there are also a number of issues that could hamper the effectiveness of modulated fees and that need to be addressed. And I think there's still quite a bit of work, certainly across the EU, to address some of those challenges. Maybe the most important of them is the issue of harmonizing the criteria along which fees will be modulated, and harmonizing those across different national EPR systems. Because if we don't do that, producers get mixed signals, and it might result in noise that will not be recognized and lead to design changes at the level of producers. There's also an issue in terms of trade-offs between the granularity of fee modulation that we would like to have to reflect, you know, a broad number of design changes, and the complexity and the cost of actually implementing fee modulation, being able to monitor and enforce the system. I think there has been a lot of feedback coming out of you know, the community of producers that you know, the costs of implementing the system, if it was too complex, could be quite high. And maybe finally, there's a challenge in finding the right amplitude of fee modulation, meaning, you know, the price difference between what you have to pay for, you know, a product that has desirable product characteristics and those that don't have those desirable characteristics, so as to deliver, you know, a sufficient amount of incentives for design changes to actually take place, while not undermining the full cost recovery principle and the financial viability of EPR systems. I probably used up my 5 minutes. I have more to say, but I will save that for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I have also already some questions, but I propose to give the floor to the two other panelists, and afterwards we will have a Q&A session and discussion. So maybe Vanessa, could you give can you give us some insight about the glass sector and EPR and how we can change and improve the eco-design?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much for the invitation, first of all. That's a very important topic, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity to exchange with you. So I prepared a few slides just to set the scene, and I'll try not to be too long, but just to give you, well, first of all, to tell you who we represent. So FEVE is the European Container Glass Industry Association. We represent over 90% of the European glass container manufacturing industry. So our members produce flacons, bottles and jars for a number of sectors in the food and beverage industry, perfumery, cosmetics, and pharmaceutical sectors, and they have more than 160 plants across Europe. So we really represent glass packaging glass manufacturers. And when it comes to glass as a material, it's important to have in mind that it is 100% and infinitely recyclable in a closed loop system. So it's really the perfect material for a circular economy. Because it's a permanent material that never loses its intrinsic properties, no matter how many times it is recycled. And so, as a matter of fact, our most important raw materials today is recycled glass. To give you a figure, on average, a glass container produced in Europe contains 52% recycled glass. And for us, that's very important because having more recycled glass in our production brings major environmental benefits. So if you increase by 10% the amount of recycled glass in glass production, that will decrease CO2 emissions by 5%. So it's very important from a circular economy perspective, but also from a decarbonization perspective. And so today the focus, of course, is on EPR, and I wanted to mention recycled content because for us, the amount or the increase in the level of recycled content that we can reinject into our production is directly linked to the availability of more better quality recycled glass that can be used for bottle-to-bottle recycling. So that's why for us it's very key to act along the value chain to optimize the quantity and the quality of the glass that is collected. So glass has been collected since the 1970s already. and it has been successfully collected via curbside and bottle banks across the EU via EPR schemes. So really, EPR schemes have been at the core of glass collection and recycling. And I put on this slide the kind of evolution of the collection for recycling rate of glass packaging, showing that in 2006, the collection rate was 60% and has increased to 78% according to our latest figures. So for the 2019 figures. So 78% is already a very good achievement, but there are very different situations across Europe, with countries performing very well, above 90%, and countries being below the average. So clearly, we have a good performance, but we need to do more. We need to do better in terms of collecting and recycling glass. And that's why we've launched in 2020 Close the Glass Loop, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative which has two objectives. One is to increase the quantities of glass that is collected, so increase the collection rate to 90%, but also improve the quality of collected glass. And that's maybe one of the challenges that we can discuss later. And so with Close the Glass Loop, the philosophy is really to bring all the stakeholders along the glass packaging value chain together to cooperate and achieve that objective. So in Close the Glass Loop, we have brands, we have EPR schemes, we have municipalities, we have glass recyclers. And the idea is really to share best practices to make sure that they are known, that they're shared, and that they are implemented with the necessary adaptations. And so we operate at European level, but also at national level with 11 platforms, because what is very important as well is to make sure that we develop and implement solutions that are tailored to the local context. And as a matter of fact, ACR Plus and CITEO are partners of Close the Glass Loop. So I would like to take the opportunity of this event to thank them for their support over the past 2 years. But clearly, we have achieved very good performance. More needs to be done, and we can discuss during the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And now I will give the floor to Margot, and afterwards we will have some question and exchange. Margot, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Margot Valentine. So I work at CITEO as an eco-design project manager. First, I can maybe quickly present you what is CITEO for those who doesn't know. So CITEO is a private company. So we are under a state agreement. So we have been created 30 years ago within the framework of the EPR, so the extended producer responsibility, so by the consumer goods company. So with this approach of EPR, so it's now mandatory for companies that put on the market packaging and graphic paper to finance and to organize the life cycle of packaging and paper. And so that is why they create CITEO to respond to this mission collectively. So CITEO is the result of the merge so in 2017 of two companies under the EPR. So Ecofolio on one side for the graphic paper, which was created in 2007, and Eco Emballage, so created in 1992 for the household packaging. And there is also Adelph, which is a subsidiary of CITEO, who assists companies so in the wine, spirits, and pharmaceutical sectors. And so CITEO, Adelph, so we are working with the whole ecosystem of the circular economy. So first, we are working with the clients. So they are supported by CITEO, so on different topics like eco-design, of course, reuse, the recycling and the recovery solution for their packaging and their paper. So in the eco-design team, we develop tools for them. We also work on the anticipation of innovation on the market, but also on the development of new recycling streams. Then we also work with industrial operators to make recycling channels always more competitive. So we are working on the modernization of sorting center, for example, following the extension of sorting guidelines, which mean that now most of the French population can sort all their packaging in the sorting bin. Before it was only the bottles for the plastic. And so this extension needed new machines in sorting center, so that now you can accept all the new type of packaging, because now you can sort your pots, your tray, or your film, which means that all the machines needs to be adapted. We also work with the local authorities to develop a collection system that are more efficient, but also to reduce littering, which is a new topic that we are working at CITEO. Public authorities, of course, in always a way to accelerate the ecological transition. The citizen, because we need to mobilize the citizen in the sorting process by the simplification of the sorting process to allow them to sort all their packaging, so by the end of 2023. But we also work with the companies to support them in informing and mobilizing the consumer. And at the end, we also work with the startups that work on innovative solutions to reduce the environmental impact of the packaging and the paper. So in this way, and because CITEO and ADELF work with the whole ecosystem, so the framework of EPR has made it possible to reduce the environmental impact of packaging and paper, and has integrated the sorting and the recycling into our daily lives, because now the sorting is the second citizen engagement after the vote. So at CITEO, we have a dedicated team working on eco-design, but I think I will come back on that after. So that, yeah, we work on a specific R&D project to anticipate the innovation, the impact they have on the streams, and try to develop new recycling stream and adapt our guidelines in accordance.
Thank you very much. And maybe before giving the floor to the audience, I would like to profit from the fact that we have Peter with us, and so maybe to have a global overview about EPR and not only on packaging. I have a question for you, always linked to how can we better drive the consumption behavior in a more sustainable way, thanks to EPR systems. Because when we speak about packaging, it's most of the time one-use items. And so we have the fee modulation, and as you mentioned before, it's always a mutualization of the responsibility. So the price signal is really weak for the consumers. Do you think, maybe not for packaging because it's really difficult because it's one-use items, but for other products or category of product, that we can have other drivers than only the fee modulation, or at least maybe increasing in a higher or in a more important way this modulation linked to, I don't know, more circular business models. I think about leasing or reuse, etc., etc. So do you have any study in progress on that aspect at OECD, or do you have any idea, not for packaging, but also for more long-lasting products that could be tackled in another way in order to push more sustainable behavior?
Thank you for the question, Françoise. Yeah, we don't really have ongoing work on this, but of course, you know, I've been thinking quite a lot about this. And see, I mean, I think, you know, because your first question was, you know, how can we strengthen, you know, the kind of impact that EPR has on consumer behavior. And See, I think the whole reason why we put responsibility for end-of-life management at the level of producers, and producers aren't the producers of the waste. It's households, it's consumers, in fact. The whole reason for that was that it was felt that this, producers are the ones that are, the ones that can influence most easily, the product design and determine then what actually reaches the market and the consumer. So I think consumer behavior. I mean, consumers they cannot process a lot of information. They have bounded rationality. They only react to information to a certain extent. It's usually 10 to 20% of the population that is sensitive to that. So there are real limits to what you can achieve at the consumer level, because consumers also need to have alternatives. If you don't have alternatives, then there is no consumer choice, and there's no way to influence consumer behavior. So I believe that to influence consumer behavior, you also need other policy tools than EPR. EPR is then not sufficient. If you want to shift consumer behavior towards more recyclable products, EPR is a good tool. If you want to shift behavior towards reusable, repair, and a range of other, say, circular economy business models, then EPR is probably not sufficient. I mean, it can help, of course. And I think in France, there are examples of how that can be built into, those objectives can be built into EPR systems. But they will not be sufficient. You need to have policies such as product bans on single-use plastic items, just to remove, unwanted items and remove them from consumer choice, essentially. You need minimum quality or product design standards that put a floor under the quality of products, and that determines a set of minimum quality criteria, so that consumers don't get the choice to choose the worst ones. You need deposit refund systems to offer reuse options, and they can be built in or connected to extended producer responsibility systems. There we have a paper that will be published very soon. So I think this is maybe what I want to say. I mean, more generally, the challenge with extended producer responsibility when it comes to influencing product design, and now also talking beyond packaging. So say in electronics, say in vehicles, batteries, etc., is that you're always trying to wag the dog by the tail, because you are focusing from the end of life and the end of life costs on a product that is multiple times and orders of magnitude more expensive than the actual end of life management costs. So I think just from that perspective, EPR will probably never be sufficient and create sufficient incentives for the very profound change, for instance, that is needed to replace single-use alternatives with reusable alternatives, because switching to reusable bottles, for instance, that involves very deep structural change in the industry. I mean, factories need to be scaled down, and more of them need to be there, serve smaller geographic areas, and that's not something that I think can be achieved through EPR. But EPR is a very central building block of a policy mix, that can bring about that kind of change. Let me just stop there.
Thank you for this, and maybe it's a good link to ask to Vanessa. first of all, how do you see this reusable aspect within the EPR system? And with your campaign, I mean, the Close the Loop glass, how have you also tackled this aspect, and how do you see the collaboration between the different stakeholders of the value chain? Because it's also a question, as just Peter mentioned, that you need to change also industry model, etc., etc. So yeah, what is your thought about this aspect?
So, well, first of all, glass is really the leading material when it comes to beverage containers. So we have figures according to which 22% of soft drinks, mineral water, and beers placed on the EU market are packed in glass. So, and these are the three categories where reuse is the most is most prominent compared to other product categories. So we are clearly leading. However, what we believe is that there is room for both single-use one-way packaging and reusable packaging. Reuse can be a good solution. It can be efficient. It can be sustainable in short supply chains, but that is not necessarily the solution everywhere for all situations, for all products. So we always need to have a case-by-case approach, looking at the benefits, the environmental benefits in particular, of using a reusable solution compared to a one-way solution. And also, as Peter mentioned, reuse is extremely complex, and reusing a glass bottle is totally different from recycling a glass bottle. So the infrastructure is different because the container needs to be transported from the filler to the retailer to the consumer, and the same way back, with, of course, the cleaning that will ensure the necessary level of hygiene and safety for the consumer. And so reverse logistics will play a key role. And so the stakeholders and the infrastructure are totally different, and we see that reuse is extremely complex. So when it comes to the role of EPR schemes, so far reuse systems have mainly been set up on a voluntary basis by the brand owners, so by brewers, for example. But we see more and more that member states and the EU are introducing targets on reuse. So there is a legislative push for reuse. And what we've seen is that the deployment of EPR has very much been driven by legislation. So with member states and the EU being more active on reuse, and I think France is an example of that, probably EPR schemes may play a bigger role as well in reuse than it has been the case so far. But again, what I want to highlight is that reuse and recycle one-way packaging are two totally different businesses, different competencies, different stakeholders, infrastructure. So it's not necessarily easy to say, well, EPR will embrace reuse. But yeah, probably Margot can tell you more about the role of EPR in reuse, but that's what I wanted to mention. And you asked about Close the Glass Loop in relation to reuse. So we have really an objective within Close the Glass Loop, which is to increase the amount of glass that is collected and the quality, because we need to have both. It's not enough to collect a lot. We need to collect good quality so that it can be reinjected into the glass production process. So as such, reuse is not part of the objectives of Close the Glass Loop. But we don't ignore reuse. For example, within Close the Glass Loop, we are trying to see the potential of the HoReCa channel, so hotels, restaurants, and cafes, in collecting more and better glass, because we know that this is a challenge, because HoReCa operators don't necessarily have the space, the time, or the knowledge, the information needed to properly collect or get rid of glass. So that's a key challenge on which we want to work. But we know that reuse is developed in some countries in the HoReCa channel. So we need to understand the reuse dynamics in order to assess the potential for recycling in the HoReCa sector, but also the share basically of what we are talking about. So there are links definitely, and so reuse is in that way kind of tackled within Close the Glass Loop, even though the core focus is on collection and recycling.
Thank you very much. And I listened to you very carefully, because you know that reuse and reuse together with EPR is really a hot topic today's. And we see also with ecosystem in France, where they have this new fund for reuse. So yeah, is it the right instrument, or clearly not enough, but can it help or not? This is a little bit the question. And I would like to of course ask a question to Margot regarding packaging and what they do in terms, of course, also in eco design, but in it's part of reusable, or at least better recycling.
Yes, so in the eco-design team, we work on different topic, but as Vanessa mentioned, we are working on the reusable topic, which is a new topic at CITEO. So CITEO has the obligation to propose standardized packaging, so reusable, so following the AGEC law, so the anti-waste for a circular economy. So for 3 sectors, there is the drinks, fresh products, and the restoration. So we are choosing this standardized packaging based on the product specification. So if it's a drink, does it need a specific barrier? Is it a hot filling, etc. So CITEO has been working on this catalog. So basically, the catalog is the definition of packaging reference. So it's a material, it's a format. It should be recognizable from the single-use packaging. And so we published this catalog at the beginning of this year. It was following different sprints with the whole stakeholders, so manufacturers, clients, federation. And so the idea of our work today is really to test if the material that we identify to be reusable are adapted for several loops. So imagine it will do like 20 loops, so we need to verify if this material are okay. And if the test results are okay, then we will go to the design part with the goal to have a packaging which is adapted for the reuse. So which means that it's different from the single-use one, but also so that the consumers can bring it back to the store. But also that can let the brand expression, because so it's a standardized packaging, but it will be used by different companies, so they have to express themselves thanks to the label, for example. And so yeah, we are working on this topic, so both in the reuse team and the eco design team. And so yeah, we will be able to share some insights in the following months. But more generally, in the eco design topic, so we have different ways to address the eco design at CITEO. So the first way is to work on the call for projects. So it's either on a specific topic. So for example, what kind of lid should I put on my tray, or for a specific sector. So this year, so in January, we'll launch a call for projects, so dedicated to the beauty and the cosmetic sectors. And the aim is really to help industrial, so it can be a client, a manufacturers, a syndicate, or any other company that can develop a prototype or a packaging to improve the recyclability of their packaging. Because for now, we know that a lot of packaging in these sectors use some non-recyclable material. And in 2030, they have the obligation to put on the market recyclable packaging only. So our objective is really to work together on these new developments, and obviously share the experience and the main conclusion from this project, so that if a company wants to do the same product development, they have all the key information. So what is working, what is not working. And so we at CITEO, we are always in this optic to share our guidelines with the whole ecosystem. Besides this call for project, we also have dedicated tools for the eco-design for our clients and even manufacturers. So we have Feel, for example, which is a tool for the diagnosis and an action plan on eco-design. We have Tree. Tree is a tool to test the recyclability of your packaging. We also have Bee, which is a life cycle analysis to determine the environmental impact of a solution compared to another one. And we have a new tool which is called Less, which is more like a method to help us to review the uses of your packaging and to implement reduction action. And we also have a dedicated e-learning platform for our clients to learn more about like expert interview, quiz on the different topics on eco design, etc. So this is another way to deal with the eco design. So we have R&D projects, obviously, that help us to continuously review our design guidelines, where we can test some innovation on the market and analyze the impact they have on the streams. We have the plastic guidelines, which is via the COTREP. So the COTREP is the Committee in France for the recyclability of plastic packaging. So basically, it represents the whole value chain, and it gives recommendation of each material or each type of packaging. The same exists for the cardboard packaging, which is the CEREC. And same committees are under construction for metal, for example, for metal packaging. And yeah, we always have the recommendation to promote the mono material to really maximize the recycled parts of the packaging. And some other example, for example, is so we have invested in pilot recycling line. So we have a partnership with the IPC, for example, to test the recyclability of their packaging. So for example, if we have a company that wants to test their packaging, they can go there and test. So if it's okay, we develop some protocols that can be used for everyone. So yeah, and we work obviously closely with the recycling stream, which is another team at CITEO that work on the development of this new recycled stream that are under construction and that we hope will be launched on the market soon, so before 2030. And I think that's what we do at the eco design team.
Thank you very much. So very interesting job and work. and my question will be linked to what Peter said at the beginning regarding European standard, etc. Do you share your guidelines at European level with other PROs, or do you work on the same level to, in a certain way, we are in a single market, the EU, so could be interesting, no, for you members, but also to have the same standards regarding eco-design discussed at PRO's level.
Yeah, the harmonization of guidelines in Europe is a topic. It's an ongoing topic that we are working on. For now, it's difficult to have standardized guidelines because we don't have maybe the same streams in different countries. We don't have the same way to eat, to consume the packaging, so we don't have the same packaging on the market. So it's quite difficult to have the same guidelines. But this is something we are working on, and we are trying to work with the European Federation to really have a harmonized guideline on some topic. But on some other topic, we are not always agree. So yeah, but it's an ongoing subject.
Yeah, would be interesting, I think, and useful to collaborate more between PROs on this. I don't know if the audience has some question on the chat, or I didn't check anything. Virginia, do you have some question written?
No question yet in the chat.
Okay. So maybe I will have another one. I'm sorry, No, because we spoke about reuse and quality of materials, and so I come back with my for the one who knows me, my dada. It's the deposit reference systems. So where are you in CITEO with this? And Peter mentioned a study about it also. I personally considered it as part of EPR, but it's another way of collecting waste and maybe having better quality and more possibility of reuse. So are you pro and or contra? Do you have this discussion still ongoing at FEVE, at CITEO, and more globally at OECD about the place of deposit refund systems, especially for, of course, beverage containers? Who starts?
Maybe I can
Yeah.
start. I can do a bit of scene setting from also on the basis of the paper that we are developing. So see, it's really a topic, and all of us will know this, that is become very prominent again on political agendas, and actually not only in Europe but also elsewhere. So it's really funny because in Europe we are we have packaging EPR everywhere basically, but we are trying to retrofit now DRS systems where they have been eliminated in history. And in the United States, it's just the other way around. They have bottle bills, so the equivalent of DRS in a lot of states, but they don't have packaging EPR, but they're now discussing the introduction of packaging EPR. So they have to, they have then to essentially similar challenges as we have in Europe. How do you combine the two in an effective way? And without killing, the system that you already have in place. And I think this is what we're looking at in our paper. Well, first of all, I think we're looking at empirical experience with the use of DRS, which is really overwhelmingly positive because it allows to achieve these very high collection rates and very high, quality of purity of the material that is collected. But it is also clear that it comes at a cost. The logistical costs are, of course, higher. And when you retrofit a DRS into an environment which already has a packaging EPR, you have an economic challenge that is then there for the existing EPR system. But to achieve very high recycling rates, and also, of course, because you have, of course, deposit refund systems, which are systems that are designed for recycling, and then you have others that can be designed for reuse. So you can, and a lot of countries, are thinking about also introducing systems for reuse. So you can, but if you have DRS for recycling, you actually increase the ability to meet very ambitious recycled content targets because of the additional amount that you collect and the additional amount of quality material, that you get, essentially allowing to do food grade, recycled plastics. So yeah, that's just a little bit of scene setting, maybe from my side.
Thank you. Maybe Margot, could you tell us a little bit how you are with CITEO and deposit refund system?
So I'm not really working on this topic, so I'm more on the DRS for reuse, which is also another aspect. And I think there is also the DRS for reuse or the DRS for recycling, and so both systems might have to live together. So that there is also a differentiation for the consumer to make in order that it will know when it will be reused or when it will be recycled. But I won't be able to give you more insights about that because we have different teams working on this topic, and which I'm not part of. So
okay, and Vanessa?
Yes. So as FEVE, we have a strong position on DRS. So on DRS for one-way packaging, because as was mentioned, DRS for reuse and DRS for one-way packaging are different. Well, the interface to consumers may be the same, but again, the systems behind are totally different. So on DRS for one-way packaging, so for recycling purposes, we prefer EPR schemes because the added value of EPR schemes is that all glass packaging, so food and beverage, perfumes, whatever, everything is collected in one place. So bottle banks or door-to-door collection. While with the DRS, you introduce a supplementary system for a small fraction of glass waste. So for a few products, usually it's beer, mineral water, and soft drinks. So that means that you need to have two systems in place. And we believe that it's confusing to consumers because they have to think about where they have to put their empty bottles. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that in terms of performance, we see that EPR schemes have a proven track record. Out of the 10 member states with a collection rate above 80%, 7 operate an EPR scheme only. So that really shows that high performance can be achieved with EPR schemes. So for us, that's really the best practice. And indeed, it's true that in the DRS waste stream, you can have good quality and high collection rate, but the fraction is small. So that can be diluted in the whole amount of glass that is collected, sorted, and then treated. So there is no really it's not really beneficial to have this supplementary system, which is so not necessarily performing on the overall target, but also very, very costly if you compare that to EPR schemes. So we really are in favor of improving EPR schemes. Again, it's not, we have reached this 78% on average. There is room for improvement in a number of countries. That's why we have closed the glass loop. But we definitely believe that DRS is not the right way forward for glass. It may be for other materials that we fully understand, because some materials need to have a clean stream for food contact packaging and for other non-food contact packaging. It's not the case for glass. So let's make it simple, convenient, cost-effective, and that will bring the best results, at least for glass.
Thank you, and very interesting because, in fact, glass is collected alone most of the time. I mean, this is a big difference with the other materials. So it makes sense that you don't need more. Okay, I think that except if we have some other question, we have to stop here because we have the second panel that will start in a few minutes with my colleague Jean-Benoit about the modification of the Waste Framework Directive that will come soon, yes, 24, so quite soon. So if you do not have other questions, I would like to thank you for this discussion, and I think that we can discuss more and more about EPR in general. And I'm sure that, and I invite you to be member of the EPR Club, because this webinar is also under the umbrella of the EPR Club, where CITEO and FEVE are active members. And I think it's really useful to have this platform where you can discuss together with the different stakeholders of the different value chains. So I thank you for your participation and attendance, and I give the floor to Jean-Benoit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Françoise, and thanks a lot for all the speakers of the first panel. Very interesting debates. Actually, I might get back to you at a later stage to ask your perspective on waste prevention. Indeed, we wanted to address waste prevention in the second panel. It's a burning issue. There's more and more discussion about having at last prevention and reuse targets in the upcoming Waste Framework Directive, and because so far it's been put high on the agenda of EU regulation, but with no binding targets, and might explain why we have achieved, we have not achieved any significant results. I will just have a short introduction before I introduce the speakers, and just to set the scene and explain a bit the perspective. And then I will introduce our two panelists for this session. But first, let me just guide you through a short introduction. Yes, as I told you, this is the evolution of municipal waste in Europe and the total quantities. And we can see an increase of recycling, as mentioned. And for that, we believe that the Waste Framework Directive, the targets and the EPR system played a very important role in boosting recycling figures and acted as a key drivers for municipal waste management. But when you look at the total quantities, it's still increasing. Actually, it's not increasing very quickly, but it's still increasing, and we have not managed to stabilize municipal waste management generation. And why does prevention matter? This is something we are addressing at EPR Plus, and we've got a campaign called More Circularity with Less Carbon, where we look at the carbon impact, the carbon footprint of municipal waste for our members. Actually, we're supported by our member, the Waste Scotland, to do so using their metric. And so this is the 6 territories that we supported. And when you look at the carbon footprint of waste management, actually, most of the case it's carbon negative, meaning that the waste management system achieved to save carbon emissions, mostly thanks to recycling that compensate or offset the emission generated by disposal. But when you add to the mix of this carbon footprint the emissions linked with the material extraction and manufacturing process of the products that become waste, then you can see that the carbon footprint is actually positive, very positive. And even the emissions saved by recycling are very far from offsetting those emissions. And as far as we know, there is still a potential for recycling to reduce this carbon footprint, but we also need strict prevention and to achieve very high prevention performances if you want to also move toward carbon neutrality. I had a quick look at the prevention targets in EU member states, and the EEA, the European Environmental Agency, published actually reports on the current state of waste prevention strategies. And actually, many member states have set prevention targets, but as always, it's really inconsistent from one place to another. And for most member states, targets are set of food waste or household waste. And then the way of setting targets is really inconsistent. It can be percentage of total waste, can be percentage of production per capita or compared to GDP units. And how the quantitative targets are set is really also very different from one place to another. So you've got very ambitious targets setting like 30%, 20% reduction, and other member states only aiming at stabilizing the waste generation. And this is actually a very complicated thing to set waste prevention targets. We had a look at household food waste generation per capita at EPR Plus, and looking at the share of avoidable food waste against unavoidable food waste. And you can see that the generated quantity per capita are quite different from one country to another. And the potential for reduction is also different. So it might be challenging to set a target that makes sense or that is as ambitious, equally ambitious for all member states. So that one might be one of the difficulty of setting targets on waste prevention. And then another issue is that we have very little insight on the potential impact of prevention actions. So we've been running strategies, local actions on waste prevention, but they are not really well documented. And so it's really difficult to see what can be realistic in terms of waste reduction with the use of traditional or common strategies. And this all those different elements makes it challenging to set targets. But on the other hand, we know that many regional or local authorities are implementing strategies and monitoring the results. And this is what we are going to see with the panelists. So we'll start with Ian Clooney from Waste Scotland. He's the Food System and Bioeconomy Program Manager, and he will explain how in Scotland they set a target for food waste reduction and how they plan to reach this target, because I think that the year for this target is coming soon. And then we'll have Johan Billon from Métropole Nice Côte d'Azur. So it's a local authorities actually implementing waste prevention on the ground in an operational way. And we'll see how they deal with that and what are the drivers behind prevention actions. And then we'll have a short discussion. So I propose to start with you, Ian, if you're ready. So you're the head of the Food Waste and Bioeconomy Program for Scotland. And I think you've got quite a significant experience in food waste because you worked in the hospitality sector, you worked as a consultant, so you also know what it means concretely to reduce food waste. And maybe you can tell us a bit more about your strategy and the very ambitious target that you set and how you plan to reach it. So the floor is yours, and if you want to share your screen, please be my guest.
Oh, great, thank you. I've got the ability to share. Sorry.
Yes.
Just 2 seconds, sorry. I will do that now. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you, apologies for that, I should have been ready.
No problem.
So yeah, thank you for the introduction. Yes, as you say, my name is Ian Clooney. I'm the Food Systems and Bioeconomy Manager at Zero Waste Scotland. Zero Waste Scotland is a government agency in Scotland which is fully funded, tackling, as the name would suggest, targeting the net zero agenda within Scotland. So we go on a bit of a journey over the next couple of minutes with me, and we'll go back in time and look at how the target was set, some of the regulations that framed that work and those targets, some of the work that's happened between now, since then till now, and also sort of discuss some of our approaches and how they've adapted and had to change. Everything that we've heard, both in the first session about EPR and obviously what I'm sure we'll hear over the next number of minutes, is around how we challenge and how we change behaviour. Ultimately, that's what we're looking to do. We're seeking to change across the whole supply chain behaviour and find that food waste is unacceptable. Right now, we're not in that place. We haven't reached that point to have citizens across Europe and certainly in Scotland, businesses and all sorts of other actors within the supply chain to understand that food waste is an absolute bedrock, an absolute key component of them achieving their net zero ambitions. If they don't reduce their food waste, they can reduce and change light bulbs, they can reduce vehicles and change to hydrogen, they can do all sorts of other things, but without tackling their food waste, they won't reach those net zero ambitions. So if we have a look at the first slide, it gives you a timeline of where we're at. So in 2012, Scotland set some waste regulations. Key element for the food waste target in there is that food businesses generating more than 50 kilos in non-rural areas is required to recycle the food waste. So we're looking at segregation there. So the first step is we're recognising there's a problem and we're asking businesses to separate out and identify that they have an issue and they can tackle that. 2016, moving forward in 4 years, and that's when I joined Zero Waste Scotland. We have the updated regulations, which requires businesses now 5 kilos. So any business producing more than 5 kilos of food waste per week is required to separate that out for collection, present that separated for collection. And again, the idea that what gets monitored, gets measured, gets challenged, gets managed, all of those are starting to come into play. So 2016, Scotland sets the Making Things Last, a circular economy strategy for Scotland. So it suggests a number of different measures. One of the key components that's set is a food waste target of 33% food waste reduction by 2025. You're absolutely right, earlier on, there's many different ways of approaching the targets. Scotland's is a per capita, so it's 33% food waste reduction per capita. That's the target that we are aiming for. So we set off on a journey and how we're going to achieve that. So you see between 2016 and 2019, we have the preceding, the intervening years, we've got a target predominantly set by politicians. So I know we're going to come on to that. How do you set targets? So predominantly this is set by politicians. They like the number 33. A third sounds good. Let's go for that. So was there any science behind it? Not a great deal. So we go with 33. It's then over to us how we're going to deliver that. So we go out and speak to thousands of people across the whole Scottish supply chain, asking them how they're the actors, they're the people that live and breathe this every day. So how are we going to achieve this food waste reduction target? We have lots of crazy ideas, lots of ones that a politician would never back. So we put them in the bin for a second, and we concentrate on the ones that we think we can manage and we can deliver on. So we developed the Food Waste Reduction Action Plan, Scotland's Food Waste Reduction Action Plan, published in 2019. One of the first ones. I sit on the EU platform for food loss and food waste. And there's lots of, as we mentioned earlier, lots of organisations, lots of member states that have really become ambitious over those intervening years, set their own targets, set national action plans, lots of really great work going on in Europe. But if we rewind back to 2016, when I first joined, wasn't that level of action, there wasn't that level of drive within member states. So it's really great to see that improving and developing and growing. So we have a look at the Food Waste Reduction Action Plan. There's lots of measures in there. There's kind of 10 key elements that we've brought them together. And one of the key elements, one of the biggest things that we have a challenge, and again, we've touched on already, is we're data poor. So if we think about food waste across Europe, we think about food waste across the world, we're data poor. We have patchy data. We have areas that are reporting fairly well, but again, as we suggested, that we don't have this standard regulation. We don't have an understanding of what food waste is like in different countries. Are we measuring the same? Well, we're not. Are we measuring the same about what's edible, what's inedible? Again, there's challenges on that. There's better methodology, far better methodology available now, but it's still something we need to keep working on together to improve and bring some coherent worldwide standards on that. Even EU-wide standards is a challenge. So we move forward through 2019. We all know what happened early 2020, unfortunately, derailing a huge amount of good work and impetus in the food waste fight. Is that pandemic hits, dreadful situation, and it actually drops off. You know, it really doesn't become what people are concerned about. Businesses are hanging on. They're looking for survival mode. They're not interested in or not they're overly interested in reducing food waste. They're really just trying to survive, frankly. And citizens are obviously affected by a huge amount of things, not least their own health and their friends and family and their loved ones. So the idea of trying to get food waste messaging is an enormous challenge for us. So we come up to the present day, and as you'll see on the slide, there is program reset. So we've now looked at everything we've been doing for the last number of years. So really, I've been involved in it for the last 6 years, but Zero Waste Scotland was doing things to a lesser extent, but it was doing things even since 2012 around the waste regulations, some messaging about food waste. So we've been at it for a number of years. We've been tackling the food waste fight for a number of years. So we've learned quite a lot, and we'll go into what we've learned and what we're going to be tackling now. So if this would go on the next slide, that would be great. Here we go. So food waste reduction program reset, as you say, we've got this world-leading target. We're now in year 6 of this post-pandemic. We've thought about how we need to reevaluate, because the target is 2025. It's literally just around the corner, and at the current trajectory, we're quite openly saying we're not going to achieve that. The pandemic has completely derailed us. So even before that, it was a very challenging target, but the pandemic has really derailed us. So what are we going to do? What are we going to try and do? So here are some of the lessons that we learned. And again, I will not read these verbatim, but some of the clear things that I'd like to pull out, because it's interesting, the previous section around EPR Businesses and organisations are more concerned about packaging and food waste. The pressure on from the consumer to business is about packaging. So we've seen the Blue Planet moment. We've seen the Attenborough programs. We've seen people talking about, oh, there's a vast amount of packaging. So we've seen so many member states doing great work about reducing packaging, and that's absolutely correct. But the challenge is that trying to get businesses, particularly business organisations, both public and private sector, to move their gaze, lift some of their attention onto food waste remains significantly challenging, because what they get, they're going to react to the voice of the customer. The customers are saying, reduce the packaging on my bananas, reduce the packaging on my meat products. That's where the pressure comes from. They don't talk about food waste in the same way. So we've got that in particular real challenge. And just the other one, highlighting at the top there, household behaviour change requires multi-dimensional approach beyond communications alone. You're pushing out messaging, whether it be through social media, through traditional press, whether that be paper, whether it be radio, whether it be television. It's more dimensional. It's incredibly challenging that you're reaching into someone's home and you're trying to change their behaviour. Food is very personal. It's what you're eating, what you're putting in your body, what you're putting in your family, what you're providing at the dinner table. So plastics is that abstract, is further removed. Food, you don't eat packaging. Yes, it's important, but it's that important that you can talk about packaging in a different manner. You're talking about food, you're talking about people's very personal choices. So it's incredibly difficult. So what do? We've framed it and we've just looked at different ways. So again, drawing on our experience, we're looking at, you must engage, you must raise that awareness, because awareness remains the significant challenge that people actually, is there a problem? Measurement remains an enormous challenge, because we don't have, just as I've alluded to, we don't have a standard methodology. We don't have this option of having, this is how we're measuring, this is how we're all measuring, therefore we can compare and contrast and learn best lessons from each other. And finally, clearly, if you follow that funnel down, we engage with people, we raise their awareness, we measure and let them understand there is an issue and this is the size of the issue or the size of the opportunity. We then move to implementation, and that's about whether it's implementation support, intervention pilots, the behaviour change, influence on stakeholders, and obviously looking to pull some of those legislative levers. We have to have some legislation to try and help us drive us. That's not going to get us there, but we need some legislation, and that should result in our food waste reduction. So I'm not going to go into this in great detail. It's what we've termed the big fish, because it looks vaguely like a big fish if you close one eye and kind of look at it abstractly, but it's a benefits mapping. What we did is we got under the skin of everything that we have done to this point across Scotland. We've drawn lessons from where we can as well, and understood you need to sell the benefits to homeowners, to businesses, to public sector, hospitals, prisons, whoever you're talking to. Food waste is not sexy. So what you need to do is you need to sell the benefits. You need to get the people engaged with the message to say, here are the benefits of you tackling. Traditionally, that was around pounds and pence or euros. It was around cash. It was around money. You could save. That's waned a bit now. That's not, maybe that's coming back up with the cost of living and the challenges that we're all living with right now. But the climate is becoming more of a tag, more of a pull, more of a lever you can pull on. But again, it's very sensitive. It's how hard you can pull on that. So prioritization, if we look at that, those benefits mapping that we had a look at how we do that. How do you prioritize? There's so much, so complex, the food waste fight. There's so many different interdependencies in people's lives, particularly for citizens who in Scotland result about 67, 68% of food waste arising happens in the home. So back to it's very personal. How do you work out all those interdependencies? They're time poor. They have 2 children, 3 children, no children. They live on their own. They live with different flatmates. They live in a tenement, an apartment. They live in a large, standard house. They have a big fridge. They have a small fridge. They have, there's so many different dynamics that are at play here. How do we get there? So we answered some of these questions about the dependencies, what's involved, what's important, what specific activities are required, what's the end point. So we did a lot of that, and again, I can share more of this information with the panel and more further on with those who've attended, but we did a lot of work on this about trying to understand what the enablers are and the benefits against that. So if we have a look at where we're at right now, we just distilled this all the way down, great Scottish word, distilling that whiskey, distilling it down to an operating plan that has these elements in it. So back to our funnel is the key sector engagement, really narrowing our focus into those that can help us, and I would say put more shoulders to the wheel, drive that. There are people that you can't speak to all of the people all of the time. You have to be prioritized. You have to get into the right frame of mind, the right people to drive that information forward. Sustained programming communications, it has to be there. It has to be part of that to keep driving the awareness. And then we just work our way through some of these other areas. Again, I'll not read verbatim. I'll just draw that green one again. That remains a challenge. And I think that's where Europe and all forums like today could really help, is just bringing out the data, bringing forward what data we do have to try and improve on that, because that's where the biggest gap is. We want to take the right actions. We need to take the right actions. We need to take them quickly, but it has to be evidence-based. It has to be based on as best possible data available. And the more data we have, yes, some people argue that might cloud the picture, but for me, I'm an advocate of getting it all out on the table and let's see what we're trying to learn on. And finally, as I said, I would take you on a journey. This is a final little bit of road that we're on. So if this is this year, if you like, so we've looked at benefits realisation, we've looked at resource, we've gone through programme boards, that's some internal stuff. Options agreed with SG, that's our paymasters, the Scottish Government, who make all this possible. And then we're into implementation. And what we're looking at the far end is a review. So that's the review that I'm talking about, this reset, to say we've actually had the action plan out for 3 years now, coming on 4 years. And actually what we need to do is hit a reset, because we've had a pandemic in the middle of that. And the benefits mapping and other elements have allowed us to draw every day as a school day, every day you're learning, and it allows us to adapt and change our approach. And I think that's one of the key messages for me, is that the adaptive approach has to be there. We have to be nimble and fleet of foot. What worked yesterday might not happen now. We're very complex. The geopolitical situation in the east of Europe is incredibly challenging, and is again tilting and changing people's minds almost on a daily basis. So we have to be adaptive. To win the food waste fight, we have to be adaptive. And that would be me if I stop sharing.
Thanks a lot, Ian. A very clear, very interesting presentation. I'll get back to you later because I think I've got a few questions for you.
Sure.
And we'll move on to Johan. So Johan, you work for Nice Metropole. We had the pleasure to work together in the past in this urban waste project and waste and tourism. And yeah, I'd like you to present a bit what Nice Metropole is doing in terms of waste prevention, and then we can discuss a bit more or where does it come from, the driver, and the future of your waste prevention strategy. So the floor is yours. If you want to share your screen, you're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Is everybody hearing me? Because I have some problem of connection.
We can see you and we can hear you perfectly.
Great. Good point. And
we can see your screen. So
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar about Teams. So is it okay?
no, just go back to your PowerPoint presentation. Yes, and put it in presentation mode.
Okay.
And then yeah.
Like this?
Yeah, it's perfect. Yep.
Okay, so the Métropole Nice Côte d'Azur is a public institution of intercommunal cooperation. We are located in south of France. We have 51 municipalities with a total of 500,000 of inhabitants, so it's a very big intercommunality. But the waste management policy, as you know, all these figures generate a huge quantity of waste to be collected each day, and that high frequency. For example, we collect and treat about 3,050 tons of waste per year in the metropole. all flow and packaging, glass, paper, bulk items, wood, green waste, all the flows. We have a network of 13 centers of waste sorting, a large number of recycling bins for glass, paper, packaging. About the sorting, about the separation, since 1 month, we have implemented a waste separation in the biggest garden in Nice. So we are very happy to implement this because we have a very good quality of waste. Because at the since 2002 we just sort the waste of the building, but no in the public area. And we tried this since 1 month, and it's for the moment it's a success. We have also one recycling center. The name is La Recyclerie des Moulins. This is a center in a district of Nice, and we will talk about this a bit later. Our waste policy is based on the Energy Transition Law for green and anti-waste law for a circular economy. Of course, the main goal of the metropole is reducing the quantity of waste produced and improve the separation, the waste separation. We work on this waste measure of reduction since 2013, and about the packaging, the separation of packaging, we work on since 2002. Here you are a few examples of our measure. For example, the provision of composter in the city of the metropole, around 14,000 individual composter implemented, around 260 sharing composter implemented in the cities and school. We make a lot of awareness raising in school, only for the reduction. We sensibilized around 1,400 classes. Every year we implement awareness campaign on food waste or marine litter, composting, circular economy, waste separation. This is very important for us. We work with CITEO. CITEO help us a lot. This is our privileged partner for the sorting, for example. Here you are some example for example about the food waste. You see the bread with a little text, I'm not close for everybody, cook me, about composting, your waste has value, compost it. Since 2018, we work on the promotion of circular economy thanks to our recycling center. This recycling center was inaugurated, as I told you, in 2018 by our president, Christian Estrosi. The amount of this investment is about 1 million euro. This is an innovative concept devised by our Nice Metropole. There are 3 functions: collection and sorting of bulky items from the Moulin. This is a district in Nice. Second, a recycling center with a repair workshop and sales area. And then an educational function around sustainable development, and the environment. So educational garden, share garden, collective composting. This is a great package. About the key figure, we collect around 357 tons of bulky items. Almost a big part of these items are sorted and recycled. We give a second life and we sell around 32 tons of items in our shop. About the turnover, it's a very small turnover because this is not for earn money, but it's around 35,000 euro per year. A lot of participants in the event, more than 2,000. And we have 4 employees permanent and 13 employees in the special contract. It's an integration program. Here are some pictures. The name is not so the recyclerie. On the left side, you have the building with the storage, and yeah, on the right side you have the shop, and inside you can see it is very cheap, but there are around 100 people per day to come in this recycling center. And on the picture you can see all the items are collected, and then the items come here to get a second life.
Thanks, Johan. Thank you very much for the presentation. Maybe I'll start with you with a few questions, and then we'll move back to Ian, if that's fine with you. My first question is, so you invested quite a bit in waste prevention and reuse. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen because I can see myself. Yes, so Nice Metropole invested quite a bit in waste prevention. We see that you conduct a few actions, and you have this reuse center, which is resource intensive. So how do you convince your local decision makers to go for waste prevention? Is it because of the national targets? Because we know that there is a kind of competition with recycling. Sometimes recycling, you've got strict targets and you have to reach them. But prevention is something you can say, we are putting it as a priority, but we are not really doing anything. So I wanted to have your view on that, and how you convince your local decision maker on the importance of prevention.
To successfully reduce waste in an intercommunality, as you know, we need a strong political support. If you don't have a strong political support, you do nothing. So in Nice, we are lucky because the people who manage the waste prevention, the political Mr. Pierre-Paul Leonelli, who manage this, is very motivated, and he's the vice president of the Metropole, Nice Côte d'Azur. So thanks to that, we have people to work on these topics. So we need to change the behavior of the people. This is, I think, this is the key, because the best waste is the waste not produced. But before that, we need to see people. We need to explain, and we have a special program since 2013. And for example, at the beginning, I was alone. And now we are 10 people. So I think the key is After that, when you reduce your waste production, you can reduce your budget for the treatment, and the treatment is very expensive. So there is a sense. If you have one or two, for example, since 10 years, we reduced the quantity of waste per inhabitants about of 80 kilos per habitant in 10 years. It's huge for us because we are in the south of France. So we are not the best, the best about the waste, unfortunately. But I think we really need a strong political support. If you have this, it's not very complicated.
Okay. And why do you think that your local elected representatives are into waste prevention? Is it because they see the benefit in terms of savings, or they think that like the change of behavior is something important for the future? Like what are the driver?
Yeah, for the future, we can continue to consume like this. So my Mr. Leonelli and our president Christian Estrosi is very sensitive about this, about the environment. We have in the metropolis Côte d'Azur, we have sea, we have mountain. You know, it's very important.
Okay. And I have another question, and then we'll move back to Ian. You mentioned that you're developing also innovative action to promote source separation out of home, like to have street bins on the street.
Yeah.
And maybe you could tell us a bit more, like you work with tourists as well, I guess. And
yeah,
how do you mix together this with waste prevention? Maybe you can talk a bit more about that and how you reach people with that.
Yeah, we work with, this is a project that we work with CITEO. CITEO help us to implement this system in our garden. I don't know exactly the size of this garden, but it's the biggest garden in Nice. This garden crosses a large part of east of Nice. The name is La Promenade du Paillon, La Coulée Verte. And a lot of people told we can sort our waste at home, but not in the cities. Why? First of all, because we tested this a few years ago on the beach, and it was a mess because it's very, very complicated on the beach. So it was a bad experience. Then with CITEO, we tried to implement this in a better environment. This is a garden. It's a garden with children. It's in front of schools. So and it's cross Nice. So we deleted all the normal bins, and let me show you. I don't know if you see that.
Yes.
Okay, on the right side, this is the box for a yellow bin and normal bin, and we have around 30 box like this. It is very nice. It's a wood box put on the grass along all this garden, and we have one yellow bin and one container for the waste. And since 1 month, for example, we basically in Nice, we collected the yellow bin 2 times per week. This one are collected 4 times per week. So it's a success. And the content of the yellow bin is very, very, very good. They are only packaging, aluminium. We are very happy for the moment. After that, we have on this garden people to talk, to make a kind of awareness. We have a big awareness campaign to explain the system. For example, on the right side, you have a building. This is one of the biggest schools in Nice. And we spent 1 week in this school to explain to the young people that the waste separation is important, because a lot of these children eat in this garden. So I think the key of the success of this is awareness, sensibilization, talk with people. This is very, very important. Be
Okay.
on the ground and
So meet the people, yeah, engage with them. Yes, thanks a lot for the explanation. Ian, maybe coming back to you. So you mentioned the waste prevention target for food, and apparently it came out of the blue a bit, like it was a political decision to set it. Because I wanted to ask you, how do you set actually a target? But apparently it might come from from someone IT. But at the same time, we see that with the climate change mitigation, we need to be ambitious as well, because we have very little time to act. So we need to set targets that are ambitious, but at the same time, we need to reach them. And yes, my question would be, if you could set a new target, like, how would you balance between the ambition and the realism?
Great question. So we've got, I suppose, the guiding light, the North Star, is the SDG goals. So SDG goal 12.3 is aiming for 50% reduction. So I think, you know, most nations have a target. If you come back to when Scotland's target was set, there was very, very few targets at a national level that were out there. The US had a food waste reduction target of 50%, but had taken out all of C&I, commercial and industrial. So that's quite a big bit to take out. So they had said 50% reduction, but we'll not count this big piece. So that was an interesting target. England had a nominal and a voluntary through the RAP organisation, a sort of 20% reduction, but that was again sort of focusing on commercial business premises, if you like. So I think if you take that into context, in 2016, when the Minister Richard Lockhead set the target of 33%, it did genuinely come out of a kind of, that sounds like a good figure, because at that point nobody across the planet was really, you know, that far advanced in the food waste fight, so they felt that was a reasonable figure. If I went back in time, I suppose I would challenge 33 as a political figure, that was a political figure that was picked out, saying, oh yeah, a third sounds good, it's more than England, so that's great as well, you know, all that kind of nonsense. So you maybe target to say 25% potentially is at least something that feels a bit more realistic. It was ambitious in those days. I think now, if we're talking a lot more about the SDG goal 12.3, sorry, and the 50% reduction than the 33%, because I think the pandemic shows, and the damage that did in the food waste fight, that 33% is highly unlikely. We don't have the data, and the data we do have is the most up-to-date data is from within the pandemic time, which is skewed. You know, it's not a great reflection. It's not exactly what was going on it was what was going on in the planet at the time, but it's not a great baseline for a figure. So I think if I was setting figures now, I would remain focused, and I am remain focused with the team about the SGD goal 12.3. You know, that feels that the world is working towards that, and that's the realistic target. And that, for me, is an ambitious target, because back to what I said during my presentation, you're challenged to get food waste on the agenda for so many people. Never mind getting them to take action, it's getting it on the agenda. You know, there are lots of businesses that will happily talk to you about their packaging, happily talk to you about their electricity or their gas bills, their utility bill, happily talk about, you know, their transport costs. So right now, fuel, diesel, petrol. But trying to talk about food waste has always been a challenge.
And how does the pandemic help on that? I don't know if it helps at all, because like food prices are also rising, and like there's a real interest in limiting the losses as well. But on the other side, you said that people are more concerned about their health or about making a living. So how do you see the impact of the pandemic, and how does it change your new strategy?
Yeah, so the pandemic showed that that in the home there were certain behaviours that were beneficial in tackling food waste. There was more people, so you had less shopping experiences. So there was a significant rise in online shopping, so click and collect or delivery to home, obviously because of the pandemic. Most people were going once a week, if that, to do a food shop. So again, you went back in time to probably the 70s, maybe 80s, maybe even earlier, where there was a food shop done once a week. So it was a bigger shop, but it was done so there was an element of that's a benefit, because people may be sticking to lists and they're not going in and out of shops constantly and picking up stuff that they maybe don't need. But then there was also this bulk buying where, you know, stuff was then potentially going off at home because they bought a bigger pack of meat or a bigger pack of two bread rather than maybe one, you know, sort of this sort of bigger purchase. So there was some conflicting evidence, and there's been a number of, we're involved in an exercise right now with a university and London School of Economics, where we're looking at some of those pandemic behaviours and can we embed, you know, the good ones. So can we try and get them to stick? But on a business aspect and a business side, I go back to what I said. I think they were trying to survive, so they went into survival mode. They then, you know, the idea of sort of improving and changing efficiencies, although their financial survival was in their grasp, for some of them, if they tackled food waste, you were still trying to get a cut through. You were still trying to get your message to cut through and resonate and get the business owner to understand and take that on board, because it was really challenging. There was many things that he or she or they were dealing with to try and say, you're struggling for financial viability, you may well not survive, but actually some of the opportunities are right here in the bin, you know, because you're throwing away 500 euros a week, you're 5,000 euros a week, 10,000 euros a week, you know, whatever it may be. In some businesses, there was lots of money that could keep them surviving, but it was still challenging to get them to get the message. So I think it was a dichotomy of businesses viewing it one way and citizens, homeowners viewing it in another way. So the pandemic was I wouldn't say a mixed bag, but there was some behaviours that were a dreadful way to put it, but, you know, they were good for food waste, but as many were good as were bad. So it's trying to, again, back to that word, distill out the good ones and say, can we get them to stick some of those behaviours?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Another question is, you introduced food waste separation in 2016, I think, and in general,
2012.
Yes, I believe that Scotland has a strong experience in waste management. You mentioned packaging. It's probably because there's a old regulation on packaging. So we've learned a lot about waste management and how to boost the target, how to engage people. But do you think those kind of instruments, this experience we had on waste management policy, can be translated to waste prevention? Like, can we just duplicate what we've done? Can we say, okay, we set a target and then people will comply? Or is it more complicated than that?
It's a bit, it is more complicated than that, because I think we have you're right. There's some good experience, you know. So there's clear good legislative levers. We started segregating in 2012, 50 kilo, quite a big number. 2016 that came down to 5 kilos. So you're talking about quite a small amount of waste every week that you need to segregate. So food waste regulations help. Two challenges around that for me is compliance. So people actually monitoring and doing it, because it's another thing you're asking businesses to do. And businesses on the whole, and again, I ran my own business for years, so they'll do things when they're told. You know, the nice to haves, the could you please do, particularly in challenging times, tend to get dropped. So particularly right now in the financial pressures they're under, nice to haves don't happen. You know, it's what I need to do to stay legal, what I need to stay to not have a problem with a regulator. So I think stronger regulation in respect of implementation. So there's actually consequences to the actions. I think that's a challenge around food waste, where you have today, right now, Scotland's banned single-use plastics. So as of today, the 1st of June, vast amount of single-use plastics are now, you can no longer use them. So, which is great, and it's a good step forward. But for me, this challenge remains on the ground, implementing that change and actually regulating it so it actually happens. Because again, there'll be huge swathes of Scottish businesses, and again, it's not because I don't care. Back to if they have stock of that product, do they have, you know, I'm thinking single-use plastics right now, you know, legislation might be in place, but you're not going to throw that in the bin. You're going to continue to use that, and you're balancing that with the consequences of saying, well, actually, is somebody going to come and check on this and that I'm doing the wrong thing? And that tends to take a wee bit of time. So I think there are behaviours that we can learn from waste management, absolutely, because there's some really solid behaviour change in there. There's some really solid changes that happen, whether it's glass collection, plastic segregation, paper and cardboard. You know, there's lots of good examples where we're now segregating waste better and utilising it better. But it remains, I suppose, a bit back to my point about benefits when I was presenting, is you need to sell to people, everybody across the supply chain, whether it be business, whether it be public sector, hospitals and such like, local councils, local administrations, or the homeowner. We need to find a way of getting the hook, you know, saying this is a benefit to you, you know, and that may be, oh, well, my hook is my motivation is the planet, my motivation is money, my motivation is freeing up more time, whatever that motivation finds, that's what we need to drill down at. But back to the point when you're introducing the session is how complex it is and what I was saying about dependencies, the minute you pull that lever, you've got to be careful that another lever's not getting pulled and you didn't intend to pull that lever, but it's being pulled. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Unintended consequences amongst food is challenging. It's not impossible. I may be sounding a bit bleak here. It's not impossible, but it's just challenging. It's very enjoyable every day to tackle the food waste fight, but it is challenging. You know, it really is.
And for waste management, like you talked about motivation and like people have different motivation for sorting waste, but we found that when you give them a motivation, when you tax their food, their residual waste, or where you control what they're doing and find them, then it gives them, like, it gives everyone a good motivation to sort their waste, and we know that as usual, it's very effective. Do you see this kind of
fiscal incentive and disincentive is one of the best ones? So I'm rewarding good behaviour or I'm punishing bad behaviour. You know, it's a very basic human nature. Is you know, that fiscal incentive is one of the strongest motivators to say, actually, if you do something well, wait a minute, I'm getting rewarded in my pocket. You don't do something well, there's an impact on me financially. That it's the political will. It's the political will to pull that lever is what we find in Scotland, and I know across the world, and certainly across Europe, is a challenge to go and talk about things like paper throw and actually to say, for that you need to pay. You know, if you're going to put cardboard, that's going to cost you. If you're going to give us segregate it correctly, actually, we're going to reduce your local taxes. We've got examples, as you say, there's good examples of it working, but it's trying to get a bigger consensus politically to say, actually, this is what we need to do, because politicians are generally thinking about the next election. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it works.
But do you see that happening for food waste? Like you see taxing people
Yeah,
on the
yeah, I
waste
do.
food, or yes, this is
Yeah.
something you're considering also?
Yeah, absolutely. We've considered since I joined, and even before, we've talked about it. The Food Waste Reduction Action Plan. We've got the Circular Economy Bill launched in Scotland, consultation launched on Monday, which includes things like mandatory reporting, for businesses to mandatory report their food waste, because right now there's lots of voluntary reporting going on, but there's not mandatory. And paper throw is always in the conversation. It's always in the conversation, but it tends to slow down and come to a stop when politicians get in amongst that, or civil servants, sort of tend to get in amongst that and say, no, we're not sure that that's going to be able to make the cut, because how palatable is it? Lots of people can, I'm paying this tax, I'm paying that tax, I'm paying the next, and now you want me to pay to put my food waste out. It's another tax which citizens don't tend to enjoy getting taxed.
Indeed. Maybe my last question will be about the politician, because they came up quite a bit during our discussion. And so they set these targets, and when you want to reach it, there's no magic formula. You need to invest in it, you need to pay for it. And when we see with waste management, waste prevention, is that waste prevention is at best a few % of the waste budget, and then like most of the costs are for collection and treatment, and that's very expensive. But like we tend to think that the investment in waste prevention are very low compared to waste management. And how do you push your politician, your local decision makers to invest in waste prevention?
Yeah, I think it's back to we are fairly lucky in Scotland that we've got quite a nimble, small government, and they've always got this big brother. I'm not going to try not to be political here, but the big brother just south. So we've got England, and the Scottish government really do enjoy being better, being quicker, delivering more than some of their colleagues. So I think irrespective of my political allegiance, that's something that we can play on. So that's specific to Scotland, is to be able to say, well, actually, there's a competition here, and you can be better. So I know you touched on it earlier on, is that you can deliver that, you can play on that competition and say, actually, you could be the best here. So there's an element of that, and Scotland, it set that target early. It's pushing lots of other targets, single-use plastics today, circular economy bill. So there's an energy about this agenda that allows us to tap in. So back to my benefits is, you can be seen as world leading. You can be seen as, pushing the agenda as opposed to following the agenda. You can be at the front of it. And the majority of the politicians react to that. So we now have a net zero minister. We have a circular economy minister. So they're actually, named as those. So that's a benefit to us. I think more widely, it is back to tapping into the benefits. What makes it work for them? So what is it that what's the benefit to them? Well, for some of it might be the competition. For some of it might be the ability to then go back to the people of the country or the region and again say that they're leading on this. They're not following. And I think the majority of people have some sort of attachment to their country or their region or their area or their city to say, actually, I don't want a city to be following or being behind all of this. I want to be at the front of it. So I tend to, and back to politicians always working on the next election, as tending to say that this will make you look good, and politicians tend to like that kind of stuff. So that's what I work on, and it seems to work right now. So,
well, thanks for your answer. I don't know if there's any question in the chat. I don't see any, but if anyone wants, we've got still 5 minutes. I'll wait a bit, but
I have just a question. In Scotland, you have organic collection?
yes.
Your waste collection?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, and we have an organic waste to landfill ban coming in 2025 as well. It was due to be brought in 2021, but again, due to the pandemic, it was pushed back. But that's any organic material can't go to landfill after 2025, and it's already reduced quite significantly. So we're looking at other options for that, other routes for that, as opposed to going to landfill. So yeah, no, there's separate collections for that.
Okay, and even in Edinburgh, in the downtown?
Yeah, challenging absolutely with the apartments and the blocks, but there are collections within place there. But again, I think it's the challenge is what I was saying about the uplift and the execution of that, the uptake of that. So there are provisions made by the council in Edinburgh and Glasgow and the cities, but the uptake of that, could be far better. Of course, it could be, and that's a challenge for our waste colleagues, our collection colleagues, to try and improve on that, and make sure you're getting all the organic material out of the general waste.
Okay. Okay, now because in Nice, we are trying to work on a special collection for the organic waste, and it's complicated. So
yeah. Well, happy to share. I know I was on a call this morning with my Northern Ireland, English, and Welsh colleagues, so the 4 nations that make up our island, and the Wales have done great stuff in tackling the apartment, the blocks of flats. They've done a lot of really good work on that. So happy to try and share that as well, because they've done a lot of really good work, and their participation rate and uplift is really quite strong. So yeah, no, happy to share that info.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, we're close to the end, so I'd like to thank you all. Thank you, Ayan. Thank you, Johan, for your interesting take on the subject. And good luck for what's coming, because we've got very, very high ambitious targets to reach in the future. So hopefully we can still work together to reach those targets. And yeah, I'd like to thank the audience for staying, and I guess that the recording will be available in a few days for you to, if you want to watch again our discussion. And yeah, I'd like to wish you a very good day, rest of the day, and thank you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.